focus on the Queensland President of the Australian Institute of International Affairs, and we've got a wonderful talk for us tonight. We've had a great year of speeches. This one, frankly, is even more topical for what is happening in Australia. We've got the Women's World Cup shortly. We've got the tremendous success of Australian women's sporting teams, and we've got the Olympics, of course, coming around the corner. But I'm not going to steal all the thunder from who's going to speak next. That's the Honourable Colin Forrest, SC, who is going to introduce our distinguished guest speaker tonight, who is also, of course, one of our councillors. So we're a bit proud of that. Colin, I'll call on you now to introduce Associate Professor Popi Sotiriadou.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate the opportunity, the privilege and the honour of introducing Associate Professor Popi Sotiriadou tonight. I worked on that pronunciation, and I can proudly say I think I got it right.
Absolutely, impressively right.
That probably has something to do with the fact that I spent 4 weeks in the Greek islands last year and have celebrating the wedding of my son to a young Greek woman.
Okay.
So, Associate Professor Popi Sotiriadou is an international expert in managing high-performance sport. She's attached to the Griffith University Business School and comes with a great CV in respect of the subject that she's going to speak with. Poppy actually commenced her adult life, I suppose, her career in sport as an international yachting representative for Greece. So those of you who didn't know that, Poppy was an international elite athlete. She then went into coaching and after that moved into the business area of sport. Poppy's going to talk to us all tonight about the subject of harnessing the power of women in sports. It should be a very interesting talk. She was able to tell me that in 1900 at the Paris Olympics, only 2% of the athletes who competed were women. At the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, 49% of the athletes who competed there were women. Nevertheless, whilst their representation has reached that level, Poppy's going to talk to us about the fact that they still are unrepresented in the area of sports management and the running, the elite bodies that run sport throughout the world, but also the opportunities that present for diplomacy and international relations in respect of harnessing the power of women across the sport field. Thank you, Associate Professor.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, and I would like also to take a turn and acknowledge the people who are traditional custodians of the land and pay my respects to the elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples. Now, I'm proudly sporting my Oceania National Olympic Committee shirt and pin, a significant sport diplomacy step across Oceania for and through sport and the Olympics in Brisbane in 2032. And we can capture a little snippet of the President announcing and reporting at the 43rd ONOC Assembly, which was held quite recently actually, and I had the pleasure of attending, 21st of April. A big announcement today of how moving forward with bringing together that ONOC Brisbane 2032 program and moving towards strengthening our partnerships in Oceania, and an extension of that, of course, to the United Nations and Sustainable Development Goals, and the uptake of Olympic scholarship by Pacific Island athletes and so forth. So really big announcement today, just got into my mailbox and I thought very good timing for me to give that speech and sport my ONOC shirt. So there you go. Now, acts of diplomacy do not have to be across Oceania to have a strong voice or a strong impact, and do not have to involve many people or many organizations or many countries, or be at scale with long-winded strategies and action items and long or short-term plans and so forth. So there could be small acts, such as the Australian professional soccer player who, Sam Kerr, who plays for Chelsea in the FA Women's Soccer League, and the Australian women's national team, the Matildas. Sam Kerr, who we see that picture here of her carrying the Australian flag during the coronation not long ago. And so that's a milestone in itself and shows the power of women in sport diplomacy. Now, while these are just two recent indicative examples of sport diplomacy, Australia's first strategic effort to have a strategy on sport diplomacy dates back not long ago, 2015, when Australia released its first sport diplomacy strategy. And that strategy truly recognised the capacity that Australian sport holds in advancing Australia's national interests and deepen Australia's people-to-people and institutional links and advance development outcomes in the region. The first strategy really achieved some significant wins, and indicatively we delivered 2 sports for development programs, one in the Pacific and the other one in Asia. The Pacific Sport Partnership, the PSP, used over 50 partnerships to enable over 1.5 million participations in sporting activities, and truly helped address inequalities experienced by women and girls, as well as people living with disability. So we strengthen sporting linkages with the Asian region, and we negotiated sports cooperation arrangements with India, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, Sri Lanka, and other countries. So the Australian government awarded 10 sport fellowships to improve the capacity of individuals and institutions to deliver quality grassroots sports programs in the region. So the list goes on. There's been a lot of achievements throughout that first iteration of the inaugural strategy. And building on that success, we have our follow-up Sport Diplomacy Strategy 2030, which states that, and I quote, sport is one of Australia's key soft power assets and can play a leading role in strengthening partnerships and promoting our national brand, end quote. So we see a clear and true statement of the power of sport that holds in diplomacy and diplomatic efforts. So the strategy is the next step towards unlocking those opportunities off-field between Australia and the global sports community, offering programs to encourage thousands of Pacific women and girls to participate in a wide range of sports from grassroots to elite level. And what's an interesting fact I came across quite recently is that there's a study that looked at keyword density in that strategy document. And it suggests that over 5% of the text is composed of inclusively oriented vocabulary, including word sets as women, girls, gender equality, and disability inclusion. So you can see where the volume of emphasis rests in that strategy. Now, I picked 2 sport diplomacy priorities that relate to today's conversation. And these two create leadership pathways and increase the participation of women and girls in sport, which I think is two things, but they are most certainly related. And the other one is harnessing the power of sport to promote gender equality. And in that statement, I would like to add equity and illustrate the difference between the two, which might be common knowledge to some of you. And I also like to sort of semi-flip that second statement in terms of harnessing the power of women in sport to promote sport diplomacy rather than the power of sport to promote gender equality. So let's roll with those areas and those priorities. And let's contextualize a little bit this and start with a brief overview of women's participation and performance in sport and the progress that we made over the years to set the scene. So we do indeed see the women's competing in the Olympic Games as the pinnacle of competition on the planet that we know of. The number of women competing at Olympic Games has been steadily increasing since 1900. So we have the Tokyo Olympic Games in 2020, the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo held in 2021, with approximately 49% of the athletes were women and 51% were men. This is the highest percentage of women's representation at this particular event and in the history of the Olympics, and that compares to just 2.2% in 1900, the Paris Olympics. So for the first time, in addition to those stats, for the first time we had 206 national Olympic committees, or we call NOCs, that they had at least one female and one male athlete in their respective Olympic teams. And all 206 NOCs and the International Olympic Committee refugee Olympic team were encouraged to have their flag carried by one female and one male at their opening ceremony. So that speaks volumes on how important gender equity and representation in sport is, and how serious the world of sports and international bodies like the International Olympic Committee and national Olympic committees are taking women's sport and their representation. So 5 years ago, 2018, that's 5 years ago, I was in Lausanne working for the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, as a consultant for women and leadership in sport. So that was the first time I saw a big jaw-dropping moment within the IOC in my initial meeting with them, when I showed them this simple image illustrating the difference between equality and equity. Because I was talking about equity, and they said to me, what's the difference? Equality, equity, what's the difference? So that image to me is worth 1,000 words, like, you know, the Japanese proverb, because it clearly shows that equality refers to equal opportunity and the same levels of support for all segments of society, whereas equity goes a step above and beyond and farther and refers to offering varying levels of support for fairness and bringing everyone on par. So that image, however simple it is, it literally changed the narrative within the IOC circles, and it was the start of a very fruitful partnership that I had with them for advancing gender equity policies in sport leadership throughout sport governance and representation. So this might be a little bit small to see clearly. So I'll take you through it. So this is the study that I did for the IOC on advancing gender equity policies in sport leadership through sport governance, and basically representation of women in international federations, national Olympic committees, and so forth. So I used a multi-level framework to deconstruct the role that board members play in advancing gender equity policies in leadership positions in sport governance. And the data were collected using all these interviews with, in particular, triathlon board members and other international federations and so forth. I'm not going to bore you with the methodology and other details. I'm not going to be too much of an academic just now. But what the figure shows, and I hope you can kind of see at least the three levels, what we see that at the bottom level, the micro level, is the individuals. So male equity champions seem to pave the way for both challenging existing stereotypes at an organizational level, which is the meso level, within the boards of directors, and at the sport level, which is the macro level, through the introduction and implementation of strategies and policies in the organizations we studied. So these strategies and policies display the power of equity, the champions of change, and their willingness and ability to create a gender equitable governance culture. So equity champions of change enable women to feel valued in leadership roles and encourage and promote the acceptance of women in the governance of sport organizations. Now, what I'd like to point out here is something that was very interesting in our findings, and I highlighted in a little red note, because we see the implicit policies as opposed to explicit, documents, do things. This is what's written in the Constitution or whatever. So one thing that was extremely interesting to see was that what people think of what is happening and of what they do does not necessarily reflect what they actually do. So their thinking is different to their doing. Even if their thinking is that we want equity, we want women, we see value, but the doing did not match the thinking or their willingness to doing. So that was a very interesting finding, and of course a lot of recommendations as a result, which I'm just going to jump to, because I want to talk about moving on from the IOC and the global level and women in sport there and leadership roles at boards of directors. I want to move on to the actual field, and I want to look at on-field performance of women in sport, because women have achieved success in individual sports such as tennis. If we're looking at Australia, got Australian women numerous Grand Slam titles over the years. And if we are to look at team sports, of course, we have we've seen the Matildas become the force to be reckoned with on the international stage. So and there's a lot of accolades there. I can name numerous performances that put the Matildas on the podium and make us celebrate the Matildas internationally. And the Matildas began 2022 by participating in the AAFC Women's Asian Cup. And so that was held in India. They played their opening match against Indonesia, and they smashed them with 18-0, a record win. I'm just going to say that. And we have Indonesian people in the audience. I'm sure they will remember the score. And that's this particular incident. And we've seen Kerr also carrying the Australian flag at the coronation. So a huge and strong political message there. And also, but let's not forget the Australian women's cricket team, the Southern Stars, that they also won multiple World Cups. Now, the point is that despite the progress made at leadership board level and teams sports and individual sports at the global platforms and all the rest of it, women's sport in Australia continues to face challenges, continues to face inequalities in pay, in sponsorship, in media coverage, and in opportunities for leadership and so forth. So we do have a lot of women leagues that struggle to get funding, sponsorship deals, media attention, and sponsorship, and so forth. So this is just a quick snapshot of some of the challenges that relate to salary or salary caps. They relate to sponsorship, they relate to funding, the pay gap, price gap, endorsements, media, and the list goes on. So you can see how we need to be mindful of that gap. Now, hopefully that video will play because we haven't tested it. And if it doesn't play, that's okay. But it's a heartfelt video that I would like to show you because I'm going to shift from the international level to the local level. And this is about the work that I've done over the past 4 years with the Logan City Council on working with the council towards a strategy for programs that will be successful in women and girls in sport in the region and vicinity and beyond. Hopefully, we'll get to trying to change. It's working. It's working here, but it's not showing there.
Makes you active.
Let me just. Do we need to change something in the settings? Maybe.
Yeah.
So we need to change screens.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So instead of this, we want that.
Yeah.
That's the kind of default screen.
Miguel, Miguel, ahí. Sí,
And if you go here,
set.
display settings. Ah, that's beautiful. Okay, then
Yes.
when that's finished, you might have to come back.
It's all right. Yeah.
All right. So I really want to show you this video because it captures how far we've come within 4 years, and then I will give you an idea of what the strategies that we put in place were, and why they actually work. All right, let's have a look.
Sport to me is fun. It makes you active. It makes you happy. You make friendships for life.
It means staying fit and healthy, meeting new people, and just having lots of fun.
My name's Linda Arkansas. I'm a football referee and football assessor here at Meakin Park at Logan.
My name's Tara and I'm 21. I started playing hockey again at the start of this year for the Logan Hockey Club. I also started coaching the under-10s team, and through that I was appointed as the junior coordinator of the Logan Hockey Committee.
I played football for 15 years, and in 1993 I became a football referee. I loved playing the game so much that I just had to be involved in it even after I had a very serious injury, and it put me out of playing. So someone said, why don't you become a referee? And so I took the course, and that was 26 years ago.
I started playing sport when I was really young. I played soccer, I did judo, gymnastics, dancing, tried everything, and then I found hockey and I fell in love with it. Coaching the under-10s, it's so rewarding, watching them all grow and mentoring them this year.
I think that all young people, young girls should do some sort of physical activity. You could be a ground official, you could be a manager.
Refereeing's always an option, coaching, even just supporting.
There's so many opportunities here for women in sport in Logan, so many different sports that they can try, and so I say get out there and do it.
Get involved! Get involved! It's game on for women.
So, Game On for Women, that was the name of our strategy. And it's been a delight to work with the women in the Logan area and beyond, as well as the Logan City Council. And after years of trying to figure out what's the most effective and efficient way to have the most impact with women in this space. So, thank you guys so much. There's 3 strategies that prove to be the most systematically impactful. Some of them more had impact more short term and others more long term. So the bursary was a very simple solution in funding or awarding a successful candidate some money towards their education in sport. So we've been working on fine-tuning that approach because over the years, in particular during COVID, and the trend forward in education is instead of people going to a university and studying for 3-4 years, doing a degree or double degree and so forth, there's a lot of people that want bites of knowledge, what we call micro-credential or a digital badge. So we're sort of adjusting that strategy to offer funding for people that just want to do a micro-credential in sports technology or women's health. And so it's becoming more and more popular in terms of people applying, and the impact of this strategy is such a long-term issue for us because more education for women, it means better jobs for women, better income for women, better lifestyle for women, better health for women, well-being, better economic contribution, social impact, and so forth. So it's got such sort of trickle down long-term socioeconomic benefits that it's just tremendous. Such a small incentive. Now, the other strategy that worked out really, really well was the sports participatory subsidy. That was $600 assistance toward a membership. And as a result of access and engagement with sport, be it swimming or training at a gym, the participants claimed several short-term outcomes from this initiative. So from staying involved to getting back into sport after having a baby or an injury or a family issue or a work issue and so forth. Also lifting hard to shake barriers like gender inequality and the opportunities available to play sport. And one participant explained programs can be male dominated. So that subsidy is enticing women to give it a go. And that's what we wanted. We wanted women to give it a go. So participants were empowered to inspire others close to them. And most commonly was their own children. And I've got a quote from the data, and it's up there. I set an example for my little boy. This is powerful. It's a small sentence, so much power in that sentence. So another thing is gym intimidation. That's real for a lot of women, and it has major health implications. So for many women, being overweight or obese or uncomfortable or body conscious has a profound effect on poor body images. And this subsidy had many untapped, it still has a lot of untapped prospects to become a very powerful community program to advance participation, promote women in sport, their stories, their success stories, the impact stories, and so forth. So The last strategy that was very impactful, and it was such a simple thing, was a series of leadership and communication workshops. So we were offering 20 spots each time for a series of workshops. Long story short, women developed skills and confidence. They built their confidence. These women in sport are ambitious. We're an ambitious species, right? And what we felt and what we observed and what we found is that they want to advocate for other women or girls in sport. One of the quotes there was Susie said, for me, it's about learning more things so I can move into other roles and continue my contribution in my club, help more girls play netball. I'm aiming for a treasurer next year. To us, to me, that was just music. Those quotes coming in as music. It was just fascinating and very rewarding. It's such a simple strategy. It can be. Another thing that I want to close this strategy with is the women-only networking. Is an increasingly appealing and growing trend. Because for three reasons. One is women feel that women get you, right? It's a networking environment that feels warm, welcoming, safe. Another benefit is that it's an opportunity for women to find mentors, relate to other women, aspire to be them, learn from them, create those mentorship relationships. And I guess it also helps build their confidence. And finally, it inspires them. So this is another figure that is very small to actually see from where you're standing potentially. But what we see here is that framework for developing women in sport. And it's a women-specific framework that addresses women's needs and reflects sports development processes for women. So it's designed with women and girls in mind. It addresses their attraction, retention, and nurturing processes, the stuff that is in red. And we see horizontally the three different strategies. And we're taking them on a journey from the outputs of those strategies, the outcomes, the impact. So short-term, long-term outcomes and impact, as well as recommendations of moving forward. This is something really powerful here. In one of the workshops, we asked them to work on a vision. And this is the draft. Sustained pathway for the growth, strong growth of, we had a bit of a conversation there about, is it women, is it people, is it, the whole gender sort of divide and conversations about this, for stronger communities, inclusive clubs, and pathways toward 2032 and beyond. Bring it on. So we went from that to this. A clear, succinct, well-articulated vision with statements in dot points of, we build strong communities. We are an inclusive network. We strive to build inclusive clubs, and we are focused on opportunities toward 2032 and beyond. This is the power of women in sport. Everyday women in sport. And there are many people who study and examine women's participation and education and leadership. Similarly, there's a lot of work on sporting events and soft power. But that message was really strong. And there is an interesting read published last year from NATO Strategic Comms Centre of Excellence. I've got a little snapshot of the cover page that states how international sports competitions have perhaps the second most widespread and normalized use of national flags and symbols after the military. So it's military and international sports competitions. Undoubtedly, sport, both in terms of athlete accomplishments and sporting events, organizations, and so forth, are a source of reputation for a country. Nations, countries use sport to tell stories of their role in fostering achievers, winners, overcomers, you know, COVID and so forth, and even triumphant underdogs. The stories that remain in our minds from big events is those stories, and these stories are used over and over and over again in media to create that emotional connection with the story. So international sporting events are drama-laden displays of national unity and purpose. Sport is increasingly featured in national strategic documents pertaining to public diplomacy. And what I'd like to, because I don't want to run out of time, I have a few key pointers here. I want to talk to you a little bit about some examples of different nations, different events, and potentially the ties between some of the messages at operational level. So we've got particular cases here of mega sport events that have taken place during the past 4 years. We've got the 2018 FIFA World Cup in the Russian Federation. I'm also using the Tokyo 2020 Olympics that took place in 2021. And the Beijing 22 Olympics in Winter Olympics in China. So, what do we see? 2018 FIFA World Cup in Russia, the mascot image, right? A football playing wolf that radiates fun, charm, and confidence. A friendly wolf that can be seen as an effort of painting over the international image of Russia as aggressor, right? And this is a quote from the document that I mentioned earlier. Now, Tokyo 2020 Summer Olympics. Japan began the countdown in Rio de Janeiro in 2016 for the Tokyo Olympics, 4 years in advance, with the then Prime Minister appearing in a Super Mario costume for the handover. A communication of modern Japanese soft power image. How? The use of sport as a tool to achieve foreign policy objectives. By dressing up as Super Mario, the Prime Minister was able to draw attention to Japan's cultural and technological contributions to the world, as well as promote the Tokyo Games. Now, the next example is the Beijing 2022 Games. So we have the mascot there, Bing Duen, that is carrying a futuristic message. So it's a full-bodied shell made out of eyes, which resembles an astronaut suit, a clear tribute to technologies, right? Advanced technologies. And, you know, we have embracing the technologies for a future and infinite possibilities. So the slogan that came with the mascot was clearly indicative of China playing a huge role in our global future and that ideology or technology. Now, I'm going to bring it home. We've seen our little Borobi in the 2016 Commonwealth Games, and it's likely that Borobi may feature in our 2032 Games. We are not sure yet. There's talk about it. But in terms of sport diplomacy, the Borobi mascot was used as a way of building connections and promote goodwill among the participating Commonwealth nations. Now, it goes further because the mascot was designed to be friendly and approachable, and its presence at the event was intended to create a welcoming and inclusive atmosphere for athletes and spectators. But it's all about Australia's sporting culture and history, right? Because the Borrowby's design incorporate elements of Indigenous Australian art and culture, which was an opportunity to highlight Australia's rich cultural heritage and promote greater understanding and appreciation of Indigenous people and culture among our visitors from other countries. So just wrapping things up, I know I don't want to take over too much of our time, but the success of women in sport can be leveraged through cultivating and fostering that cross-cultural exchange, building relationships, promoting international cooperation through sport diplomatic initiatives, sports exchange programs, so we can establish exchange programs where women athletes can go and train, coaches and officials can go to other countries and train and collaborate and immerse in their culture, and they learn from our culture, knowledge sharing and all those beautiful things. And of course, there's a lot of opportunities to do all that through and at the Brisbane Olympics. So there's a lot of room to build on that success that I mentioned at both the international field, national and local levels, and build on previous successes to prioritize our gender equality and equity and promote women's sport. We can showcase women athletes from diverse backgrounds and cultures and their representation, and show how Australia is a multicultural country and represents a lot of parts of the world in these events. So, and also overall, I guess, prioritizing gender equality in the planning and organizing of an event. It's interesting because there's a lot of headhunting companies out there now, which I actually found out through my contacts in LinkedIn, that do headhunt women, high-profile women, to represent the Brisbane 2032 Olympic Committee or other high-profile, not just sporting events, but sports-related communities and foundations and organizations. And that's a great shift from even 5 years ago. So I think I'm going to wrap things up in terms of the concept of soft power and how helpful or not so helpful it might be in establishing the what, but also the why of sport diplomacy. So given its public diplomacy roots, the gains that sport diplomacy brings to a nation also falls into the realm of gaining allies by soft power and forging these relationships, not by coercion, but by attraction, so that others want what you want. And I would argue that it's hard to say that hosting a mega event, cost around that would provide the best return on investment in the form of increased soft power. But the legacy aspect is also debatable too. And this is why I'd like to quote some of my colleagues in Europe that state that sport diplomacy offers at least a partial answer to the unanswered question as to why states host mega sport events. So why do we host mega sport events, even if it's all debated? We see the importance of gender equality and equity and diplomacy in sport becoming an increasingly recognized space. And it's possible that if we give it more attention, we will have a lot bigger gains. What's a little bit troubling is that even though in Australia we see from 2015 a huge sort of emphasis in sport diplomacy and women in sport and people with disabilities and accessibility and all that, the research that follows that interest is not matched. So this is my open call for infusing more empirical evidence and guiding that strategy with more evidence-based findings. And I'm just going to close here with a big statement that the Australian government is committed to enhance our international engagement through sport and advance Australia's national interest. And I think I hope that I have made a case to support that big statement and hope to see more in this space and translate that thinking into more doing. Thank you.
For that really interesting talk. I'm sure you're prepared to answer any questions now that are asked, both from the in-person audience that we have here tonight and from any of those people that are watching online. And whilst you were talking, I just actually had a recollection that the person who had been appointed as the Chief Executive Officer of the Brisbane Games Organising Committee is actually a woman, Cindy Hook, who was head of one of the big accounting firms for quite a few years. And, have you had anything to do with her at all? Have you met her?
Met her on a couple of occasions, including the inaugural conference. Obviously, she gets invited to all these big events and occasions, and I've been to a few of those events where she was speaking about the huge task ahead. But I do think that we've got the right person to lead the way, and her accolades and her past experiences speak volumes of how far she can take us in this journey. She did admit that it's not going to be a highway kind of thing. It's going to be bumpy, but we'll get there and we'll shine through. And yeah, I'm pretty confident that we are in good hands.
Yeah, well, I hope she manages to ensure that they keep the lights on at the Gabba. Having been there one night recently during a game when the lights went out and they stayed off for 40 minutes, I thought they might fix this problem by the time the Olympics come around. Does anyone in the audience? Yes, Greg.
Yeah, my question is, whilst it's great to see the numbers advancing through, as you mentioned, the Olympics, and we're seeing women being paid more and there's more television and so on. But what are the strategies to ensure that at the highest level, when you look at the IOCs, the FINAs, the FIFAs, where one country representative goes on those boards, and they're mostly always males, what's the strategy to ensure there's more balance in those bodies, so we don't have a FIFA and FINA and IOC full of male representatives of the different.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the initial strategy was using a quota. You know, you had
one of each, maybe.
You had to have, in Australia too, there had to be at least a 30% representation of women in any boards, in any committees, and so forth and so forth. Now, the problem was that at some stage they were using that in a tokenistic approach where you just chuck in a woman, we hit the 30%, can we get our funding please? And they were caught up in doing that. And the problem was that it wasn't just about ticking the numbers and hitting that 30%, because a lot of the work that I've done showed that when there's a 30% representation of women in any board, in any capacity, they still felt that they didn't have a voice. So, and the other finding, which was fascinating, was that a lot of women tended to change their behavior and their attitude to a more male approach because that's what's accepted. So in order to be accepted in a leadership role and in the board that they were part of, they were changing their behavior, the way they would dress, the way they would talk, the way they will address everyone to fit in. And that defeats completely the purpose of having gender balance. And then there was new studies that came out and showed that there's actually skill complementarity there. You know, there's a lot of benefits to allowing women to be women because of that skill complementarity and so forth. Long story to answer your question, but there's been so much work and so much effort to recognize the benefits and the inclusion of women in sports. And the thing is, there's some sports, like triathlon, is a newer sport. So the International Federation of Triathlon is a standout exemplar of gender equity in pay, in representation, in prize, in everything. But there's also a lot of older sports that are dominated by males, and a lot of the times males unfortunately tend to bring on board alike. So males will bring on males. And this is where a lot of the systemic problems exist in the sport industry.
Paul had a question?
Yeah.
Thanks, Poppy. Perhaps a bit of a follow-on from that question. We've seen a lot of publicity and action, I'm not sure if we're all the way yet, in what one would call traditionally male sports, but have now developed strong women's competitions, football, AFL, cricket, rugby league, rugby union.
Basketball.
Basketball.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, though, if you look at a sport that traditionally was overwhelmingly female, such as netball, has it kept pace with has its remuneration for professional athletes in netball matched the increase in remuneration for women athletes in those traditional male sports, or is it higher or lower? And what do you think about
I can't tell you about the numbers. I wouldn't be able to tell you that. But netball has always been a separate case, all right, because of its traditional representation of women in netball. And what's interesting then, what I can comment on is that when there was a board for netball, for, board of directors, the argument was that if you want equity in other sports, then how come the netball board of directors is women only? So that's interesting because you need gender representation across the board. So I could not tell you numbers I think netball is a completely separate case. When kids grow up, male, female, they all play netball, but then it becomes a women at that elite level. But they did have troubles as well in terms of attracting sponsorship, attracting media attention. But they had really strong leadership that put netball on the global map, and they've done amazing stuff for the past, I'd say, decade, if not longer.
David?
The Women's World Cup football is Australia, New Zealand in coming months.
Yeah.
How important is that for the issues that you're talking about? Because I know there are some problems with it. Some of the European countries are balking at the television right fees. But imagine it's going to be huge here for a couple of months.
It's hugely important, and one of the key messages that comes across from the Women's FIFA Cup is the concept of empowering young girls and women in sport. that's the mantra of it. So they're trying to use it as a platform to create the next generation of soccer girls playing soccer and promoting the world at a global stage, and the athletes and the team and so forth. There's actually an SBS, I can't remember what it's called. Oh, is it SBS?
Disney
or
Plus.
Disney Plus, yeah. There's a series on Disney Plus. Unfortunately, I don't have Disney Plus. I thought of buying Disney Plus just to watch.
It's very good.
Is it?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
very
I think I'm going to have to invest on that.
Yeah.
But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the key message that I'm sensing is the mantra, capturing the interest of that sensation of women's performance at this level to inspire.
So that's good storytelling and effective storytelling, and it's not just, I guess, throwing it in your faces as well. It's going from the losses to the highs, and it was very well done.
Yeah, and the role that athlete success has in creating role models, because there's a lot of girls that don't have women role models, and there's a huge gap there. We need that, and I think this is where the opportunity rests with that
There
particular.
was one, I'll take this one final question just here.
Yes, I'm interested in sports which are female only, but only have a limited, recreational base, unlike netball. Because my granddaughter's in the state team for rhythmic gymnastics, and they're in that position. And it's an extremely political sport where Australia has a lot to offer, as does the US, and would partner with it, and maybe Israel and a couple of others. And so it's a very interesting at that level, and my husband would take that. But it has no capacity to lobby because it's totally female. It doesn't fit your paradigm.
No, that's I love this question for many reasons. One, because I was a rhythmic gymnast.
Right, so you know what.
So I have lived and breathed.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that
it's very challenging sport.
the issue with some sports that are not, the Australian government has spread sports into tiers, clustered them. Tier 1, you're the best sport. You bring medals, you bring money, we'll love you. We'll give you money because you bring money. You bring success.
Yeah.
Tier 2, Tier 3, right? Rhythmic gymnastics is, I don't even know if it even makes it to Tier 3.
It's very expensive. And I would say that the Logan City Council is totally unique. I can find anywhere in Australia in its support of rhythmic gymnastics.
Yeah.
So
it's a huge challenge to try to support, excel, make progress, stand out in a sport that is hardly supported. And there are opportunities.
It's supported by ethnic groups mainly.
Yeah. Even gymnastics, there's a lot of programs for athlete transition or athlete sort of movement from one sport to the other, in particular gymnastics and rhythmic gymnastics, because it's an early specialization sport. By the time you're 15, 17, that's it, you retire. But you're still an elite athlete. So what do? So luckily, there's a lot of programs that help with that transition from sport to sport and use that enthusiasm, elitism, athleticism to transition to sport. But unfortunately, sports that don't have the numbers and don't attract the media and the sponsorship deals are the ones that traditionally suffer. Yeah.
You can't put
Popi?
a logo on it.
Yeah.
We Aussies love we love to talk sport. We could talk sport all day and all night. Sorry that our time's run out. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation tonight. I'm now going to ask David, our secretary, to come and just wrap up by thanking you.
Thank you
and
so
telling
much.
us
Thank
what's
you.
ahead.
Thank you very much, Poppy. Just stand over there.